Well, good evening, freedom fighters and Alberta patriots. Here we are again with another evening, and I hope that we'll have a few more people engaged and we'll go into the chat tonight so we can answer some questions. I keep having people say they'd like to interact more, and that's always a bit of a challenge. But anyways, that's part of the schedule tonight. But what I want to really discuss tonight is the absolute dilemma, perhaps a stronger word than that should be used, the crisis in our oil and gas industry on egress and kind of the history of it and what's happened over the years. And I remember, and I was actually kind of pleased in 2008 when Obama got elected and he says, we're going to shut down the Keystone XL. And I thought, well, there's always a silver lining. And what's the silver lining? Well, this gives our Prime Minister, Stephen Harper, the actual go ahead to say, in our national interest, we need to have a pipeline to the West Coast. He talked about that early on when he was there. He talked about Alberta becoming a superpower and producing oil and gas for the world. And it never happened. And I was very disappointed that, from 2008 until 2013, there was a 4-year long process for Northern Gateway, lots of controversy. But the fact of the matter is that oil and gas is one of the great blessings of, I want to say, of the 21st century and how it improves people's lives. I still have said, and I'll continue to say, that the best thing that Alberta could do for those developing nations and those places that are struggling and people doesn't have access to clean water and to food and to be able to cook is to have refillable propane bottles, little 5-10 pound bottles for these individuals to actually have access to propane. And what a change that would make. That, and again, the new technology with water filters, we could really have an impact on the quality of life on so many people around the world for such a small price. But anyways, the dilemma is, and I love the saying, Alberta the world needs more oil and gas from Alberta. And that's the fact that if you look around the world, and again, we've spoken many times that our environmental regulations are second to none, our labor laws are second to none, our labor, our human rights, all of those things are a great concern to Albertans, and we're doing a better job every year of ensuring that Albertans have that opportunity to go out and work and earn a living and live in a safe environment. But yet we continue to be attacked from around the world like our oil and gas is something to be ashamed of and we shouldn't produce. And when Stephen Harper lost office and our current Prime Minister gained office, one of the first things he did was try to fulfill his promise to put a West Coast tanker ban on so that we would have no desire to build a pipeline to the West Coast. And I don't know, the only thing that we can explain is the fact that he's very much a globalist and he wants to hurt Alberta. And the best way he can do that is by closing down our exports of oil and gas, though so many of them depend on it and have benefited so much over the years. The $600 billion that we've contributed has in large come because of the oil and gas industry here in Alberta, which has benefited not only Canadians, but people around the world. But yet we continue to have this attack, this idea of the Great Reset. Very frustrating to me that people don't understand and see through this, that there should just be a total uprising, in my opinion, to say no to these draconian measures. But anyways, Bill C-48, our current Prime Minister brought that in with this tanker ban, which basically shut down most people's hope. And I guess I want to say companies like Enbridge, with the rhetoric that was going on, had no desire to start the Northern Gateway for fear that it would be canceled. Disappointed that they didn't do it, but nevertheless, that's the situation we're in. Then we put most all of our eggs into the Keystone XL again when Trump got in there, and our premier put in, $1.5 billion in cash, another $6 billion in loan guarantees, but yet fail to look at other options. Energy East was blocked, and we continue to be viciously attacked from not only within our own country but outside. And we know from such excellent people as Vivian Krause, who have tracked the money from foreign interference in our elections, and to the lobbyists, I want to call the enviro hypocrites that continue to attack our industry. And the question is what can or should we do? And the first thing we need is a premier who's actually willing to follow through and protect Alberta's interest in Confederation. And our current premier fails to do that. I spoke on one of my earlier podcasts, about the Nova Gas transmission line expansion inside Alberta, and how that was basically held back for a year, and TC Energy decided not to go ahead with that. And I don't know that they will in the spring. But again, 5,000 jobs were lost, billions of dollars investment, and then when you look at the domino effect of how much more drilling might have gone on this winter had that line been in the progress of being built. And so between Bill C-48, and then the problem was Bill C-69, which basically took the Canadian Energy Regulator and says it's not good enough to have regulations in the oil and gas industry. What we need to have is federal cabinet oversight. And so if there's something else that we can politically maneuver or stop, that's where it should sit, inside cabinet. And so we know that Prime Minister Trudeau has used that to his advantage to hurt Alberta and then continue to close us down. And it's just wrong, and our premier seems to fail to stand up and to do anything about it. And want to talk a little bit about a few of the things that we can and should do. But probably the most important thing that I feel that we can do is to actually, and the First Nations, the Indigenous people, have come forward with different plans over the years to try and work with the oil and gas industry and with government. And currently, right now, there's a project called the Eagle Spirit Initiative. And this is led by an individual, Calvin Helen, who I've spoken with and I've met before. And again, Premier Kenney actually used him for campaigning and fundraising. And I want to say, what would you say, brought him along for the election and said, oh, this looks good and everything else, but dropped him like a hot potato after he got elected. And we need a pipeline to Tidewater. It's just critical for Alberta's future and for the future of our children and our grandchildren, is to be able to have world access of our world-class petrochemical and fossil fuels and hydrocarbons to meet the energy demands of the world. And without that pipeline, we continue to be hurt. But the key, I feel, is the pairing with the Indigenous people who are trying to do so. And the Eagle Spirit project is an exciting one. I believe that Calvin Helen has reached out and has the vast majority of the Indigenous bands across northern BC and into Alberta wanting and willing to participate with industry to create an energy corridor that would allow us to export our fossil fuels. And it's interesting that, in his own frustration and because of Bill C-48, he's looking at building that pipeline, that corridor up into Alaska, so we don't have to deal with the tanker ban. And it's unbelievable to think that we'll ban our products, but yet you just go a couple hundred miles further north and we get into the tip of Alaska, and there we're able to do it. And so again, those are very frustrating things that we can and should do. But when we look at the importance of a pipeline and what it would do for Alberta and the energy industry, it's just crazy that we continue to bang our heads against the brick wall. The TMX, I was able to verify yet today, but my understanding is that it got shut down at Christmas time. There was supposedly one case of COVID, and there was one loss of life. And I don't believe that they're still proceeding with that yet. And any and every excuse they can to delay that project, they continue to implement and use as a crutch to stop that. And it's just unacceptable. And we need a premier who will stand up and speak out and say this has to get going again. These projects should be being worked. But the frustration thing for me with the TMX, and I don't know how many people realize this, but it does go down and through a fairly populated area. The storage tanks are not in the most ideal place. I understand all of the individuals that aren't thrilled about it, not wanting the expansion, but yet it was forced down through, and the federal government wanted that. And I still believe the biggest reason was to minimize the growth and the expansion, because it's only 350,000 barrels a day expansion. But the biggest problem with the TMX is that the super tankers can't come in to fill up there because of the second bridge. The super tankers are not able to fill up, and so it would take four tankers to go in to pick up the oil and gas at Burnaby and the products there to ship out. Whereas one super tanker, a much more cost effective, would be the answer. And another reason why the Northern Gateway or this Eagle Spirit initiative should be taking place. But nonetheless, we seem to have a prime minister who's more competent at shutting it down than our premier is about fighting for it, or have the desire. Maybe I should say our prime minister is more passionate about shutting us down than about allowing it to go through. But David, maybe if you just want to put up section 121 of the Constitution, we can read this. This is section 21 of the B&A Act, and it reads as follows: all articles of growth, produce, or manufacture of any one of the provinces shall, from and after the Union, be admitted free into each of the other provinces. And so, there's no question that we understood when we were part of Canada that it would be a benefit, and we'd be able to have that free transportation of our produce and our goods. And yet that's not being respected. And I just think that we need a premier who will say no to this. And I think the most effective and important thing that we can and should do as a province is to actually create what I call the Alberta Revenue Agency inside our Treasury Board and collect all the taxes. Every federal tax would go through and be collected by Albertans here in Alberta for Albertans. And with that money in trust and being held, we would then be in a bargaining position to say what federal programs we are willing to participate in and which ones we're not. But without taking some sort of action, it's very clear that we are going to be continued to be shut down and not able to, I want to say, revive our oil and gas industry under the current conditions. And it's just unacceptable. And our premier, for whatever reason, refuses to do anything about it and says, oh, we're going to be nice and play in the sandbox and not throw any sand when it's getting dumped on us and they're shutting down our industry. And so I'd like, to open up if anybody has some comments or some questions, what we can and should be doing here for our oil and gas industry. Be happy to discuss those. And I'm just going to touch for a minute again to go back and say, two of the things that we produce for the world, which are just world class, is one, our petrochemicals, our hydrocarbons, and two is the food. Alberta's got a pristine agricultural country where everything from our cattle to the wheat to our canola, it's world class. It's second to none. And it's clean. And we don't need Ottawa to tell us how to look after our land, our air, or our water. Thank you very much. We know how to do that. And we just need to, like I say, take control of these things by actually taking control of the collection of taxes. And many people will say, oh, we can't do that. Well, the Constitution isn't being respected by the federal government. The Constitution has many flaws that allow, and I've said it before, that the 7 wolves can vote to take the lambs from the 5 sheep, and that plunder is perfectly legal under our Constitution. And we need a premier who says no more. And again, we talk often about it. The number one thing for me is like I say, to collect the taxes. Number 2 is to create the provincial police force that has civilian oversight and accountable to elected civilians, not to politicians. It's disappointing to see how politicians will use power for their own purpose and not protecting the people and the people's rights. We've talked many times about the COVID dilemma, and again, I will continue to speak out and to say that we need to have our freedoms. But this ongoing problem isn't going to be solved unless we take action as Albertans and have a government that will take action. And so we also need the Alberta pension plan. There's no reason for us to keep over contributing to a failing Canada pension plan when we could actually be building a real pension plan here in Alberta that would be more like the Ontario's teachers pension plan or the Quebec government. Both of those are pension plans with sizable savings that are being invested for their benefit. And that's what we should be doing here in Alberta. And again, we should be having our own employment insurance policies. We don't need to be subsidizing the rest of the workforce of Canada with our premiums. And I don't know that this last year whether we actually will because of the number of people unemployed, but I suspect because of how much we overpay that we're still probably paying over 100% of the employment insurance premiums here in Canada and subsidizing other provinces. Another big one that we continue to tackle and where our premier needs to stand up is on the environment. And I've spoken before, in 1930, Premier Brownlee was able to bargain with Canada, and we got the Resource Transfer Act, which we weren't allowed to have when we first came in 1905 because of their desire to extract the resources from us. But that's been trumped with the Environmental Act, and we do not need Ottawa and their hypocrisy to say what we can and can't do here. We understand, and again, we have world-class environmental laws. And those are, the issues that we really need to be addressing. The other one I talk about is immigration, and we should be taking control of that. But bottom line, we really do need to have a premier that will stand up and say enough is enough and draw the line in the sand. I think the most, what would I say, offensive thing right now are these federal quarantine facilities where they're actually, taking people who land in the Calgary airport and seconding them off to these hotels where they're not getting decent food, where they're being locked up at their own expenses, and it's just wrong. And yet we don't seem to have a provincial government that will stand up and say, you step off of the federal property of the airport and we're going to arrest you for kidnapping Albertans. We need the premier to tell Ottawa that healthcare is a provincial issue and we don't need your help on those things. But I don't know, David, do we have some questions that we can address here? I'm just kind of switched over to comments, and I see there's some comments here. Without oil and gas, good question there. Comment, Eldon. Without oil and gas, we wouldn't have survived these past weeks. I think most of North America is that. Oh, he's put it on the screen, actually. My family in Houston had no power this morning, -10, perhaps due to having put too much faith in wind power. Makes you realize how important carbon-based energy really is to our survival. One of the interesting transformations of humanity is where they went from hunters to hunters and gatherers to an agrarian society and started storing food and water, which is so critical. And there's no question that the amount of energy that we can store in a fuel tank is amazing, and in our pipelines the natural gas that we can use. So no, excellent point. And again, that's where I kind of use the term from an individual who called me last week, and he likes the term enviro hypocrites, and I've called them green hypocrites or whatnot, but it's so true. Oh, and here's Sylvie. We have our own hypocrites here in the we'll go on the big screen, easier for me to read. Here in the educated healthcare workers, we are at war. This is bigger than just Alberta. What will you do about those unions? Well, there's three things that I've always said that's a real problem. The first one being big government, all powerful, and having that heavy hand that they can whack back and forth. The second one is big industry. And it is quite alarming to see what Google and Facebook and Twitter have been doing to free speech, and that access to those platforms and their hypocrisy of just saying what's right. And the third one is big unions. And again, when you get these big super unions with hundreds of thousands of people and across borders and provincial borders and stuff, it's a problem. And what we need to do is to have an open and fair playing field, and the right to work, and individuals that if you need to form a union in your town or in a larger area, that's one thing, but to have these province-wide and Canada-wide unions is not in our best interest. Centralized unions are no different than centralized government, and again, centralized big business. And so we need to have an open and fair playing field, and for individuals to have the right to work. And I think, though, the most important thing that we could do off the bat is to stop collecting union dues for the unions. If they want to do that, they can collect that from their own members on their own, rather than us being the bad guys who collect it and then hand it over to them for them to use it against us. But I hope that answers your question, Sylvie, on what we can do. Do you have a plan for paid protesters that will block our railways and pipelines? Sure do. It's called the law. I'm going to have to take a little sip here, getting a dry mouth. The most important thing in a civilized country is our constitution, and the recognition of the rule of law. And we have freedom of assembly, we have the freedom to protest, but you don't have the freedom to stop someone else from doing what they're trying to do, or a business. And when those protesters go out on the road and stop traffic, or strap themselves to trees and stop an industry, or whatever it is that they want to do, they've broken the law. They need to be arrested. They need to be charged with damages and be held accountable for their actions. Peaceful protest, peaceful assembly, absolutely. But harming other people, stopping them from working, causing work stoppage, that's against the law. And there's no question that with an Alberta Provincial Police Force, we would be moving on them fast and charging them. And when it happens in other jurisdictions, we should be putting force and some pressure on them to respect the law. But yes, we absolutely can stop those protesters, and that's because we actually have the rule of law. Is there another one there, David, that we can answer? Then let's start this referendum for the Alberta Revenue Agency. We will need it when we separate, and the more we do now, the closer we'll be to separation. Oh, thank you, Sharon. That's when I first came on and accepted this job as the interim leader, one of the conditions is that, no, look, we need to find solutions. There's no point in criticizing if we don't have a solution. And the most exciting thing would be is if we're so successful that in 6 months, Jason sees that parade and says, wow, we've got to act on this. And he would actually start doing these things. But it's quite clear that he's a globalist. He wants to drag his feet. He wants to spend millions of dollars studying on these no-brainers. And the biggest insult of all to me is this idea that he wants to give us a referendum on equalization. And what does that do? He says, well, that gives me some backing to go and say that I want to open up talks on the fair deal and on our constitution. It does do that, but it doesn't change the numbers, and it doesn't change the fact that they can legally do this to us. And that's not what we need a referendum on. What we need a referendum on is on recall. And the reason why we need a referendum on recall is because when legislation's passed, and I still remember when I was in the House, when Premier Stelmach wasn't able to balance the budget, and threw out Premier Klein's legislation on balanced budgets. And had Premier Klein allowed us to do a referendum on balanced budgets, it would have handcuffed Premier Stelmach, and he would have had to go back to the people and get a referendum to change that. And so by passing different legislation through the House and then through a referendum, it has a lot more strength. I mean, the ultimate strength is to have a new government with a new constitution, with recall in the constitution. But the next best thing is passing it through a referendum. And we need to have a referendum on balanced budgets. We need one on citizens' initiative referendums that are binding on the government. We need one to say that, yes, we want a provincial police force. I even think we need a referendum to ban what I want to call medical mandates. What we continue to learn from government is their draconian idea and abuse of power. And for me, there's just no question that the role of government is to be looking around the world, and I'm talking about COVID right now, and seeing, all of the research that's being done and the double-blind studies, and to be going through that and saying, what's being learned out there, because we should be doing those double-blind studies right here in Alberta, and they don't. At least I'm not aware of any. They started some, but they withdrew those on hydroxychloroquine. They've never started one on ivermectin. There's just no reason why we couldn't have been giving those, especially to seniors, to sit down, talk to them, inform them, and then let doctors have a discussion with them. And so, this idea of a referendum on equalization versus something that's binding and that actually protects the people is where we need to go on those. And so, it's just one of those things that is very different, very discouraging, that our premier continues to want to study a police force, study, tax collection, and says, oh, it might cost a lot. Do you know that there's 40,000 employees in the Canadian Revenue Agency, or it's probably only around 38,000, but who knows, since the last one, they probably hired 2,000 or 3,000 more. And it's always troubled me in our so-called legal system. We fail to have a justice system that is supposed to be innocent until proven guilty, but yet when it comes to the Canadian Revenue Agency, you're actually guilty until you can prove you're innocent. And that's why we need to keep all of our papers and all of our documents, because when they come after us, if we don't have those things, we're guilty. It's not good enough to just say it. But anyways, we absolutely need to have a referendum on the revenue agency, and that would also give us the clout to Ottawa, say that no, this is what Albertans want. But these are all important things, and an excellent question, Sharon. But do you want to move on to the next one, David? Businesses collect those federal taxes. Are you saying those businesses will send them to the province instead of the feds? The feds could seize bank accounts and probably charge them. There are sections 91 and 92 that we are under till separation. Well, that's an excellent question, Ron, and I guess I want to put a little bit of a twist here in that, if, like, right now we send, a lot of our taxes, if you're sending in by mail, and we're doing it email now, it goes to Manitoba, it goes to New Brunswick, and those places are set up there. There's no reason why we can't collect the taxes here in Alberta and then send them to Ottawa. And when Ottawa's not playing by the rules, we can collect them and have them in trust here, and Alberta Revenue Agency will say whether or not. But right now, you're right. Everything goes out east, and they have the authority to come in. But if we're actually collecting them here in Alberta, and if we had the same thing with our own police force, if Justin was to say, go out and seize the guns, we have our own police force, and we tell them, no, we're not going to go seize the guns. We're fine here in Alberta. Nothing's going to change. And it's the same with the revenue. We absolutely need to protect the individual and the businesses. And that's why I say we create the Alberta Revenue Agency, and that money flows through to Alberta and then to Ottawa. We would have the records here that would be coming to us, and not to Ottawa. But we absolutely need to protect individuals. We need to protect the businesses, and that's why we need to have it here in Alberta, so that we have that protection for them. But excellent question. It's a concern to many people, and absolutely, I would never say don't send your money to Ottawa, but send it to Alberta, if we didn't have everything set up, and just let Ottawa know that this is the process that we're going through. We're collecting all the taxes. We will forward those on. And if we have a dispute, we'll hold them in trust, and we can go through the dispute. But I hope that answers your question, Randy, and that will be there. From Kathy: what would happen if we just went forward with projects within our province, regardless of what the federal government says? Tech is one example. This is definitely one of the problems, that whether we look at Tech or TC Energy or Enbridge or any of these multinational companies, they're worried about doing businesses in other parts of Canada and the world. And because we don't look after them here, there's this conflict of interest. But I truly believe that if we were to stand up and say no to Ottawa and give them permission, that's what they need. They need the clarity that there isn't the conflict between the two levels of government. I believe that the premier should have been speaking out weeks before on tech and letting them know that, hey, if you are going to stop this development, there's going to be repercussions, and there's going to be major repercussions. And again, like I say, putting our house in order and taking back all of that, those jurisdictions that we've allowed the federal government to take, whether it's our healthcare, the policing, the environment, all of those things, we need to say, no, we're going to do them here in-house. But we need a provincial government that will stand up to them. TC Energy's Nova Gas transmission expansion line is a classic example. Thousands of jobs lost, and yet that's within our own provincial boundaries, and we've allowed it to be hijacked by Bill 69 and needing the authority or the permission of the federal Liberal cabinet, and it's not going to happen. Yes, there could be a little bit of conflict, but we're to that point. Are we going to allow them to kill us with 1,000 cuts, or are we going to stand up and fight? I believe we stand up and fight, and that we don't need to continue to bleed to death because of the daily wounds that the federal government wants to impose on our industry. But hope that answers your question. Thanks, Kathy, for that one. Next one from Dennis. When would you and other independent parties get together from a single form? I think that's supposed to be form a single front. If you don't, it will split the vote. We are beat before we start. Well, thanks, Dennis, and I understand the concern. In politics, it's always about vote splitting, even when it's just between two parties, the NDP and the UCP. How do we split the vote? And yes, I understand you're saying, well, this is another split, but I would argue that it's actually going to be the NDP and the UCP and all the other Federalist parties that will be splitting the vote with the Wild Rose. We're 2 years out from an election. I think it'll be very evident long before the next election that the Wild Rose Independence Party is the elephant in the room for the independent movement, and that we'll continue to build your trust and confidence with our policies that we pass, with the individuals that get nominated in our different CAs as we grow the party. I think Albertans will be able to appreciate just the passion and the love for our province that people have here, and the willing to stand up and fight. But excellent question. And again, the biggest thing is, and I guess where we can win before it even starts, is by growing our membership. If every one of our members, and I don't know, it's another question or point I'll bring up here, that when we send out our party emails, we think a large percentage of those are not getting to our members and is going into their promotions or the junk mail. And we need you to go into your contact points and put in the address contact@wildrose.party. And even if you go to our website and send off an email to us and say that, hey, I'm not getting any emails from you, we need to be able to communicate with our members and to be confident that you're getting our emails. But what we need to do to eliminate the worry about splitting the vote is to grow our memberships. And again, I think 2 weeks ago, we put out the drive for every member to reach out and to bring someone on board for 4 weeks. And literally, if every member did that, we would quadruple our size in 1 month. And we would go from, 6,500 plus, getting up into the 25, 30,000. And then from 30,000, you can kind of rest. We can grow, develop our CAs, and then we can put another drive, and everybody goes out and just converts 2 people. And all of a sudden, we're at 90,000. And if we can reach out, and again, the Main Street media is no help in trying to reach out there, but if we can do word of mouth and our members talk to other people, send them to our website, wildrose.party, have a look at it, realize that this is a new party that's committed to actually serve Albertans and to put them first, their freedoms, their property, their businesses, their industry. The government is formed to protect people. and yet it's just the opposite. The people are being attacked by our governments, and our freedoms are being taken away, where we can't even associate, or we can't speak out if we're not on the narrative for fear of repercussions. And the same with these different industries. But no, I truly believe, and again, when we kick off, I'm not sure when, but soon the party will be announcing when the leadership race will be kicked off. And that's another thing for people to know, that no, that this is the leader that we're going into the next election, will be very comforting and help in growing our party. But I just, you know, I'm just so confident that as we continue to share our message, and you talk to your neighbors, your friends, your co-workers, and bring them to the site and encourage them that, hey, I'm a member, you need to check this out, this is our only hope for our children and our grandchildren, that's how we're going to organically grow this party. And the vote splitting will be over before the election starts, in my opinion. But appreciate that concern, it's a real one, and we'll try to address it. Can you outline what actions plans need to happen to get us to Tidewater? Well, thank you, Jody. The first thing is that we need a government that's actually working to that, because right now every pipeline that's made application has hit nothing but policy problems with the different levels of government. And so you need a commitment. Number two, there's no question that we need to include the Indigenous people, and to have them part, and it's a win-win. That you know, it's the number one employee of Indigenous people in the north and the oil and gas industry, and we need to reach out and to hire them and to train them. But so we need to map out a corridor. And again, if you look up, and I actually haven't gone to their site, now's a poor time to try and do that, but the Eagle Spirit initiative, I've actually talked to a consultant, and maybe I'll try and get him on, and maybe that's what we should do to really do this properly, is to bring a consultant on that's been working with Eagle Spirit and to go through that process. But bottom line is that under Bill C-69, you need to make application, and there's you know, I don't know how many hundreds of pages of conditions that need to be met, and you know, to address the different concerns, everything from the environment to labor and everything else in there. But the two biggest things that we need is for the government to acknowledge that we need a pipeline to the coast that's in the national interest. And then we need to be working with the First Nations, and to bring private industry in with that three-way group to get the pipeline. But there's been more than enough engineering done. I mean, the old Enbridge line, it actually got the go-ahead in 2013, but to my understanding, Enbridge was too nervous to actually start to build it, for fear that it would get stopped, and it did come to fruition that the tanker ban was put in place, and the federal governments did win in 2015, and the Conservatives lost, who were somewhat supportive of it. But it really is, the biggest thing is to get the go-ahead from the federal government right now, where that should be taken away, and it should be the go-ahead from the Canadian Energy Regulator. But I'll talk to this consultant and see if I can't bring him on to talk specifically about the Eagle Spirit, because to me, that's the answer that we need to go forward with. Everything else has been shut down, and I don't see it kickstarting again without government and the First Nations and industry coming together. But I hope that answers your question, but we'll go into it further. But next one from Beverly. Alberta Health Services is under provincial jurisdiction. We also need our own version of the FDA, Federal Drug, what is that? The Federal Drug, can't believe I don't know that one, Beverly. I should be able to tell you that. Drug and Food and Drug Administration. Sorry. There is no reason we don't have the therapeutics available elsewhere. There is no way Trudeau will allow Health Canada to authorize a Canadian vaccine, let alone an Alberta one. Well, that's interesting, and it, I hope you're wrong about that. I hope that they will recognize an Alberta one. Again, in our national interest, there's no reason why we're not producing and doing these things. But this is all part of why myself and so many that I talk to, realize and understand that this is about the great global reset. That they can't continue this fear mongering if, in fact, they were to allow doctors to use their own research and their own professionalism on how to treat COVID. It's just showing more and more down in the States, in South America, over in India. The research is showing that hydrochloroquine is an effective um, prophylactic for this. Ivermectin is another one that has a high efficacy. Zinc is important. Vitamin D is important. And again, we never hear about that here in Alberta, and everything is hard to get to. But no, it's another reason why we need to, in my opinion, have our own sovereign nation and have a justice system and a healthcare system where we can let the entrepreneurs of the world race to find answers and to repurpose drugs, and not have this idea that only big industry can solve it in these vaccines. And again, it's disheartening to me. I spoke with a doctor who oversees and cares for seniors in Calgary. He's over 5 facilities. They've all received both shots. Their workers have received both shots. And yet they're still in complete lockdown. They're wearing masks, all the PPE. And like, are you kidding me? We're spending this billions of dollars. We've got the vaccination. And again, this is the fallacy of it all. The flu season, every year they change the vaccine for influenza. And again, the truth of the matter is that influenza A and B is more dangerous for the average Albertan out there, but yet COVID has taken front and center. And yes, it is more dangerous for seniors, but there's no reason with the vaccinations now and to be able to vaccinate seniors. If that's the solution, well, then we have it. But yet the draconian lockdowns continue, the destruction of people's lives, their economy. It's just unbelievable how they want to attack us. And yeah, we need our own Alberta drug and food and drug act here, because it's obvious the federal will not allow us to have that. But thank you for that question. Is there another one, or are we getting to the end of them, David? What do we do about the UN Sustainable Agenda 2030? Well, Renee, what we do is say no to it. But again, unless we're a sovereign Alberta, it is pretty hard. Our good old prime minister has said that he's excited about it. I honestly just don't know if he doesn't understand, or whether he is just so what would I say, enamored with the fallacy of a Green New Deal. I'd like to sidestep here for a minute. I was reading a report this week, and I wasn't going to talk about it here. I can't remember which company put it out there, but do you realize that it takes, I think, 500,000 tons of earth to be moved in order to build one solar panel? And I can't remember what the size of it was, but the amount of mining that needs to be taken place to find these rare earth minerals is unbelievable. And they're so against mining and all of this other stuff, but yet they want solar panels and windmills that require a vast amount of research, or of mining, not to talk about the batteries and the need for lithium, and how much work and everything else that goes through all of that. But anyways, it's not sustainable. It's a complete fallacy. They talk about building back better. It won't even come close. We can already see places like Germany and France and other places that have tried desperately to put in more solar panels and wind panels, or windmills. And what they found is that they have to put in the gas backups, the natural gas or coal plants, in order to back up for when those sun goes down or the wind stops. And it's just such a hoax. It's discouraging how much propaganda they continue to put out there. And too many people are looking at it from a superficial level and are buying into it when we need a government that actually stands up and puts out the numbers and lets Albertans realize what the cost is, and that these things are not sustainable. As much as they want to say they're sustainable, they're absolutely not. They're not cost effective, and we need to educate people on that. But what's the next one we've got there, David? Hi, Paul. I met you at the Freedom Walk. What do you think of Kenny's lockdown measures? Well, Eric, thanks very much for coming out to the Freedom Walks. The disappointing part of the Freedom Walks to me is there aren't 10 times the amount of Albertans that say we have to say no to this. But the lockdowns are wrong. The lockdowns are doing far more harm than the virus ever would or could. I just hear more and more tragic stories of children that are struggling and suffering. Had an individual the other day telling me about a 7-year-old, and just how depressed this individual is. 7 years old and depressed because she can't go see her friends, and she can't go and sing, can't go to church, all these things that she loves and wants to do, and the answer is no. And again, pandemic, I mean, what do we want to call it? I hate saying it's a pandemic, because it isn't. But pre-COVID lockdowns, we were struggling already with mental health. I just can't even start to imagine how much trouble we're going to continue to have going forward. I've talked about domestic abuse. I've talked about, people that are losing their homes because they've mortgaged their homes in order to keep their business going. The long-term damage to families and to businesses, it's criminal to me, and we just need to keep speaking out. We need to be sending emails. Please tell people to go to our website and to send emails to the Premier to end the lockdown. These province-wide lockdowns are wrong. But again, I can't thank you enough. I think it was Eric, the name's down here now. But for coming out to those Freedom Walks, and we need to keep working hard to keep telling the Premier that, for those people who want to isolate and stay home, please do, but don't tell the rest of us we can't. And I was talking to a friend again today, and he said, well, his friend always says the West was built by those courageous enough to come. The cowards stayed in the East, and the weak died on their way over here. And I respect those people that are fearful for their life, but they can't keep pointing the finger and saying that those who are willing to take the risk to go out, to go to work, to deliver, to create wealth in this province. I just don't understand that they can't understand that we can't have this lockdown go on in perpetuity and somehow think that the governments can just keep printing money, and that we're not going to have a day of accountability, and it's going to be a very sad and long day of accountability, I'm afraid. But no, the lockdowns are wrong, and we need to continue to hammer our Premier to end these lockdowns. Next question. I agree with you 100%, but we fight federal government law, rules, etc.? Well, that's the greatest benefit of actually having a provincial government that will fight the federal government. As individuals, it's very difficult. I mean, the JCCF is doing some great work. Randy Hillier, the MPP from Ontario, he's put his neck on the line. He received a $100,000 fine. I think he was supposed to be in court on the 9th of January, and when he got there, it wasn't on the docket. And he goes in and where's my day in court? I want to challenge this. And we don't know where it is. It's happening here. The JCCF, has had court dates. They were in on the 19th of December. They hope to open us up for the 23rd of December. The courts gave the province, I don't know what it was here, to the 7th of January, but there's been no court date set. And that's one of the things in I always say our legal system, because we just don't have a justice system, is that we deserve our day in court. And again, they've been asked, that you can't demonstrate that this is justifiable, these lockdowns and the damage it's doing, but we can't even get into the court system. But as a provincial government, we could be saying no to all of these measures. We could stand up for Albertans and their businesses. And that's why there's so many of us that are so passionate and working so hard, and the amount of volunteers that are going on, and the donations that are coming to the party, is because the safest and the easiest pathway forward is to put in a government, the Wild Rose Independence Party, that will actually protect the people and protect them from Ottawa as well. But hope that answers your question. What do we have up next then? From Travis Ward, how can we stand up in regards to the 3-day quarantine forced by the government? As individuals, and again, I guess I'll just say what I've heard a few lawyers say, but again, it's very difficult. It's easy to say these things when you're not the one that's being confronted. I heard of one couple that got home. The husband passed, the wife didn't, and said that their papers weren't in order. And the husband says, "Well, I'm not leaving her." And the federal enforcement officer says, "Well, you can't come, we're just taking her." And he says, "Nope, you'll have to arrest us." And he walked off. I haven't been able to verify that, but they let him walk off. And I guess if it was me, I would be pushing hard to say, that you don't have the right to put me into quarantine. I'll go home. I'll respect the 14 days, and I would try to walk out. But the biggest thing is that we need Albertans to phone, email, and to show up at our MLA offices and say, end this, that these are federal agents that the federal government has hired to do this to Albertans, and it's just wrong. And again, to me, the premier can say that the second those people leave the airport grounds, we'll arrest these scumbags and we'll free Albertans. We need to stand up for them, but our premier fails to do any of those things. And again, all we can do is to continue the strength in numbers, and try and send in the emails, and make the phone calls, and talk to your MLAs, and basically harass them like we're being harassed for trying to just enjoy our life and carry on. Next question. Maybe Alberta should buy oil infrastructure out east to gain leverage to counteract C-48 and C-69. Well, that's what Energy East was about, was to get our oil out to New Brunswick. Gosh, I can't believe I can't think of the name of the company out there. I want to say Stat Oil, but I don't think that's it. I mean, we have refineries out east. Energy East was to send our product down there so it could be refined. But I want to back up and say that our problem is that Alberta, our entrepreneurial spirit, our resources, our land, our people, our education system is a threat to the global agenda. They can only implement the global agenda by instilling the fear in people and the failure that we have no hope, that the only hope we have is to declare bankruptcy and turn everything over to a central global government that will say we're going to look after you. And we know that that's never worked. Venezuela is just a wonderfully terrible example of what happens when the rule of law is thrown out and you have a dictator come in who says that we're going to look after the people. They went from the most prosperous nation in South America to second worst. And it's never worked anywhere. Communism fell in the 80s, and these are nothing but socialist and communist people who want power and control over other people's lives. And the fact of the matter is people like Klaus Schwab and Maurice Strong, who's passed on, and the other ones, the World Health Organization, the UN, they're against humanity. They think that humans are the scourge of the earth, and this is a move to stop humanity. And unless we realize that and say no to all of these things, they continue like cancer to grow and at a prolific rate. But we need to stand up and say no, and it's strength in numbers. But it can be discouraging to look at that and say, how are we going to stop this? But That's kind of what we need to do, is to stand up. And again, that's why we've created the Wild Rose Independence Party. It's about changing politics and changing our constitution. But we got any more, David? From Murray Cochrane, sorry. What do you think? Oh my goodness, of the $1,200 frontline workers? I really appreciate frontline workers, but this to me is part of the fear mongering, that in order to perpetuate that fear, that now we need to give danger pay to the frontline workers, like, oh, this is the most draconian and terrible thing that we're asking them to do, but yet those people who have lost their jobs, lost their businesses, don't need it. No offense to the frontline workers, but this to me is the perpetuation of fear mongering by saying that, oh, this is so dangerous what you're doing, that we now need to give you $1,200. And most every frontline worker that I know, and I know senior caregivers, I know nurses, I've talked to doctors, all of them that have wanted the shots have received it, and so that they got the shots first. I mean, that was their benefit, and able to take that, and then yet now we still need to, at the expense of taxpayers and those people without jobs, pay them danger pay. I'm sorry, it's just part of the fear mongering, and it's wrong, and shouldn't have happened. Next question, David. I follow George Clark on Facebook, and he shows us his site, Alberta's various electric grid supply numbers generated by gas, coal, wind, and solar. Had we needed to be dependent on wind or solar, we would have frozen to death. As an independent Alberta, we should address this very important issue of electrical supply. I have to say that was one of the things that got me, that put me over the fence. Um, I'm an irrigation farmer, and one of my biggest bills was electricity every year. And my father and myself, we actually tried to put up windmills in the 80s, and all we wanted was net metering. We didn't even want to be paid if we produced more. We just wanted to be able to have zero-based metering, not net metering. We weren't able to do that. And I can't remember what year that the Alberta government came up with this idea that they were going to deregulate the production of energy, but all they did was oligopolize it. They didn't allow entrepreneurs to be ready. I think, was it January 1st, 2000, when they actually deregulated the production of electricity? I have to go back and check my notes. But anyways, there were many applications of individuals who wanted to build power plants in order to produce electricity, and they were all turned down by the Alberta regulator, and said, oh, we have enough. Well, a free market allows people to come in and produce. Our system is in shambles. There's no reason for it. We can open up the competitiveness, or we could go back and regulate it. I think that it would be better to just open it up to be competitively bid, and change the bid system. Again, it's a very poor system, to where the consumer loses all the time on how it works. But yes, electricity is just as vital for Albertans as our natural gas is for heating our homes, and what we use it for. And it should be critical infrastructure, and we should be protecting it. But I'm just seeing on here that we've been going for an hour. It's been an awesome evening. It's inspiring to me, to the people that I talk to every day on the phone, that realize that we're in a disaster zone, and it's up to us to get out of it. That if we do nothing, we're going to lose. There's no question about that. And so I want to thank you for your questions. Sorry we didn't get through all of them, but this is our fight for freedom. This is for patriot Albertans to stand up and say no. Yeah, please go to my website, paulhinman.com. We need to be able to connect. Make sure you go to your email, especially if you're a member and you haven't been getting emails. please go to our webpage and send us an email and let us know that you're not getting them. We send them out every Sunday at noon. The odd time we send out extra ones, but you should be receiving them. And if you've unsubscribed, please subscribe again, and send us an email on whether, you say, look, once a week is too often, but this is a battle for our future, for our children and our grandchildren. And we need to every week, we need to be going out, talking to people, and getting them to go to the website, wildrose.party, and being part of a movement that is going to create a healthy and wealthy Alberta. Right now we're hurting, and we need to change that. And the safest and easiest way is by supporting a new political party that actually is going to focus and protect you, your family, your life, your business, your opportunity to work. But I just want to thank we just got such great members, and like I say, it's just a thrill to talk to them every day, and for the relief that it is for so many to realize that, wow, there is something we can do, because most Albertans realize there's a problem, but they don't know what to do. They haven't even heard of the Wild Rose Independence Party. They're discouraged, and again, there's nothing worse than being discouraged and hopeless and not knowing where to go. We have a great message. We have a great opportunity. I thank each and every one of you. Please talk to your neighbors, and let's keep building this party. And we'll talk again soon. Thanks very much for tuning in.